We're going to be starting our off-season article. So we have a new off-season. Looking forward to the 2022 regular season. And I write in my article. I wrote this a few weeks ago too. These off seasons are they're a time of hope. Hopefully this should give you some hope, hope of a better team than maybe you had last year, hope of repeating a title. But once we get started closer to this rookie draft, after we get the NFL draft out of the way and then close to the rookie draft, it gives a lot of people hope, a sense of something to look forward to, a sense of excitement. So I'm really excited to be getting some articles to you over this off season. But before we do, I wanted to kind of wrap up the regular season and then also into the playoffs. So I want to talk about some Dynasty Owner League winners. I did a few articles back right about end of November, beginning of December, about who I predicted was going to be some Dynasty Owner League winners. So I'm going to do a follow-up with you guys on this, see how I did. Turns out didn't do too well. But I'll bring you some actual league winners, some players that really did win people their league. So let's jump into it. First, we're going to talk about some quarterbacks. Quarterback position, I chose Aaron Rodgers and Jalen Hurts to be my picks as league winners. Pretty chalk picks, pretty standard picks. Both ended up, having pretty respectable 3 weeks over that fantasy playoffs. They both averaged over 20 fantasy points per game from week 15 to 17. And then Rodgers actually averaged close to 30, so he was right at 28 fantasy points per game. So even with these solid performances, they were no match for Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is my Dynasty Owner League winner for this year. What Burrow did between week 16 and 17 was literally record-breaking, let alone, for a player of his age. So he was only 8 yards shy of 1,000 yards in those 2 games. And on top of that, he posted 8 touchdowns in those 2 games. He averaged 53.3 fantasy points and was far and away the most impressive quarterback, over the semifinal into the final. On a personal note, I've mentioned this in my article, I got absolutely beat down by Burrow. And there was actually, the player I was playing had Jamar Chase as well. So Burrow-Chase stack absolutely demolished me. It was a quick exit. I knew pretty early on in the day that I wasn't going to be winning the title. So I guess I'd rather have it that way. But I got absolutely demolished by them too, as I'm sure some of you probably else did too, if you went up against them. This goes without even mentioning the fact that Burrow's salary is right at $9 million. So one of the cheaper quarterbacks in Dynasty Owner. Really amazing stuff out of Burrow to end the season. QB6 at the end of the season, if anybody is wondering. So running backs, I was really rooting for the 2 running backs that I picked to be league winners. They were both, they were good picks. They had good schedules ahead of them, as did most of the players that I'm going to talk about. But Javonte Williams and James Robinson were the players that I picked. Williams, he actually saw a decent amount of volume, pretty much right on par with what I expected. He just wasn't able to do much with that volume. He wasn't really that productive. So he played the Bengals, Raiders, Chargers, the final 3 weeks of playoffs. He averaged only 3.1 yards per carry. Just not what you're looking for. Really not great. He had a single touchdown, which helped you, but it's not enough to make up for that 3.1 yards per carry, especially when he's already splitting work, with Melvin Gordon. So far from the impressive prediction that I had for him, and the prediction was 250 total yards, 9 receptions, 2 touchdowns. So he wasn't really close to that. Overall, Williams, he impressed me on the season. I like how he played. Hopefully, he gives people something to look forward to next season when they're drafting him. Hopefully, what he did these last few games doesn't really, drag his value down too much. I don't think it will. I think people look through that and see what he did on the season, especially with the uncertainty of Melvin Gordon. We don't know where he's going to end up, if he's coming back to the team, if he's going to move on. So hopefully these last few weeks of the season didn't dissuade anybody from picking up Williams in their startup drafts. Second running back that I want to talk about is James Robinson. So I mentioned him. He had a fantastic schedule to end the season. He had a great week 15 against Houston. So he had 17.8 fantasy points. Looked like he was right on pace to do what I predicted for him. And unfortunately, in week 16, he suffered a partial tear in his left Achilles. Obviously, with season ending, more disappointing, though, is how this is going to affect him moving forward on his career path. So hopefully he earns another chance. I don't think it's going to be with Jaguars, just given how, draft capital they put into Travis Etienne and just the overall revolving door of managers and coaches there. So we'll see. Hopefully he can be back to 100% to start the season, but we've seen how difficult that is, especially off an Achilles injury. So like I said, we'll see. But the running back I want to talk about who's been the most impressive over these playoffs was Rashad Penny. Very refreshing to see this. A mini breakout, I'd call it, just because it was such a small sample size, but a great mini breakout from Penny. especially given the draft capital that we saw invested in him, in the actual NFL. And then also how much hype he had entering the league, his first rookie season. So you love to see this. It took a long time to happen, but I love seeing this. So Penny was not only solid through the playoffs, but he got better as you got closer to the final. 6.1 points in Week 15 out against the Rams, not great. That's obviously a poor start. If he'd continued that, we would be talking about him. But Week 16 versus the Bears, 21.5, very good. And then championship week versus the Lions, Week 17, 34.5 fantasy points. That won people their championship if they started him. That's so much to overcome if you're the opposing player, the opposing owner going up against Penny. So he really showed a true workhorse ability in Week 17. 27 touches, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Really great stuff out of Penny. Penny's future, however, is still uncertain. So his rookie contract will be expiring. The Seahawks declined to pick up his fifth-year option. So it's kind of up in the air. Hopefully, I'm sure he'll get a shot with somebody. It's not going to be a big contract, I wouldn't predict, but we'll talk about that more, as we go through the offseason, players and teams. Wide receiver, the wide receiver that I'm picking is Deebo Samuel. Yes, there are other wide receivers that were statistically better in the final 3 weeks of the playoffs, but I don't really care. I'm going to talk about Deebo because he has just been that electric, that amazing this season to watch. Also, the other players that I want to mention that were statistically better than him were Jamar Chase. No real surprise there. And then Devonte Adams just doing what he always usually does. But I want to talk about Deebo. So rock solid, consistent throughout the entire 21 season. He never fell below 10 fantasy points in any game that he played in. He had 20. He had in 7 of his games, he had 20 or more fantasy points. And 3 games, he had over 30 fantasy points. So, and he was just amazingly consistent. Didn't disappoint in the playoffs either. He averaged 20.7 fantasy points per game. A lot of rushing work. Love to see it. I said it before. I've written this probably 3 or 4 times in all my articles this year, but there was no other player I enjoyed watching this season more than Deebo Samuel. Just the way that the 49ers used him, the way that he was gadgeted in, it was remarkable to see. I loved watching it. And this statement's true, even though I didn't even own Deebo in any of my Dynasty owner leagues. So it was just great to watch. I look forward to watching this 2022 season. Contract year for him. If you own him, enjoy his final cheap year because it's going to get expensive after this year. $1.8 million is what we're making next year. So tight end. My 2 tight end picks, they seemed like pretty solid picks when I made them. I was happy with them. They were Noah Fant and Logan Thomas, unfortunately. Logan Thomas, season-ending IR, pretty much right after I released it. Right after I finished writing that article, before it was even released, I think. That's when he went on the IR. So disappointing there. Didn't really get to see anything happen. Second pick, Noah Fant. Finished pretty close to my prediction. He was right on for total yards, right on for receptions. He was 1 touchdown short. So fantasy points were a little bit less just because of that missed touchdown. But overall, I had him, pretty much right on where I wanted him. He was inconsistent though. So and that's kind of a staple of these tight ends. But he was inconsistent over his final 3 games. He had 10.7, 6, and then 21.2. So a very good fantasy finish, in Week 17. But those other 2 weeks, it's just real inconsistent. It didn't kill you, obviously, for a tight end, a low-end tight end at that. But just not what you want to see, I guess from a dynasty owner league winner. You want to see a little bit more points than that. So I want to talk about the player that I'm picking as the actual league winner. And yes, it could be Andrews. It probably should be Andrews. But I'm going to go away from the chalk picks here once again. So Andrews, he ranks on the top of pretty much every list this entire season. And weeks 15 through 17 is included in that. He was the best tight end over those 3 weeks. I want to talk about Dalton Schultz, though. Schultz, very quietly, compared to Andrews. Andrews, this big breakout, everyone's been talking about it. Schultz quietly has had a sensational end to his season. He finished with 20.7, 22.2, and 11.4 fantasy points. Very good. He's earned himself a top tight end salary next year, no doubt about it. It's going to be hard for owners to stomach that new salary because it's going to be a top tier, probably north of $12 million, at least north of $10 million. But regardless, you need to celebrate what he's done for you, especially if you owned him, especially if you got your championship. Celebrate that now. Worry about his contract in the future. I imagine his ownership's going to go way down just because those tight ends, and he's a top-tier tight end as far as fantasy points, at least the past couple of seasons. But it's just so hard to stomach, over $10 million for a tight end when you can, pick one off, up cheap, and they'll give you 5 or 6 points a game. So I don't know. It'll be a conversation I need to talk about with you guys over the off season, but that's pretty much all I want to talk about. Those are the 4 positions, the true Dynasty owner league winners for this year. And this was kind of just a bridge video and article to get us through the regular season. So I'm sure I'll be bringing you some content next week. We'll be talking about some individual teams, individual players, and it's going to be some good stuff. So I appreciate everybody listening and reading my articles, and I will see you